Welcome to another edition of the Coaching Hour. If you're watching this live on Facebook, a warm welcome to you. If perhaps you're watching this after we've done the recording or just listening to the podcast, it's great to have you here for the journey. I'm Paul Rotherham. We're into season 2 of the Coaching Hour, and we're into week 3 of Warren joining us. Warren Munitz and Marika and Mary are on board as well. Hello, ladies.
Hi, Paul.
Mary's disappeared.
Hello.
Oh, there you are. Hello.
I had to unmute myself.
Oh, that's okay. No problem. If you hear the odd little squeal, it's the cat on my lap saying hello. As you know, never a dull moment here at home. There's always a cat around. We have 8 of them. So, Marika, we're into week 3 with Warren. It's been a wonderful couple of weeks so far. What are we doing today?
Yes, thank you, Paul. And yeah, unfortunately, today is our final session with Warren, where he's sharing some information of his stress mastery course. And today we're going to talk about cultivating compassion. But before we get into that, Warren Munitz is an executive master coach, author, and founder of Integrative Coaching. And thank you so much again for sharing your wisdom with us today. Now, interesting topic that we have, cultivating compassion, and it's part of your stress mastery course. And I don't know if everybody else might have this question, but where does compassion fit into stress management, if I can call it that?
Absolutely. Firstly, thank you for having me again. It's been great to be on your show. So it's such an important piece of the puzzle in mastery. And if you remember when we looked at step 1, which is the problem is the path, you're confronted with the problem. You're confronted with a challenge, right? And then the step 2 is calm the conscious mind. And in calm the conscious mind, we talked about non-judgment. And how do you practice non-judgment, which is noticing your thoughts and noticing the judgments and noticing the criticism and not buying into it. So when you are confronted with this aspect of yourself or these aspects of yourself, it's painful. It's often quite painful. And that's where we have to start having compassion for ourselves. Otherwise, it's not possible really to have compassion for other people. So if you think of the term empathy, is to be able to feel and connect with what you're feeling without judging it. So compassion, imagine compassion being an overarching experience of this empathy. So if you have to face yourself, which is to face your shadow, those are things that we don't like. So if you consider that this psyche, the idea, the sense of who I am is made up of different dimensions. One dimension is the conscious mind, the sense of self, the ego, and the personality. Another aspect of this psyche is the shadow, what we do not like, what we deny, what we suppress, which is about ourselves, really. So what happens then is when we suppress our own content, so for example, let's say you don't like, let's say I was your son and you don't like anger. And every time I became angry, you just turned away and walked away. All of a sudden, I might think, oh my gosh, I don't want to lose that love. So I might start to suppress my anger. So I push it into the shadow because I don't want to lose the love of my mother. So then what happens over time is that when I see anger, I then point that out and I dislike it in other people as well. But what is happening to my anger is I'm bottling it up. And the reason why I'm pointing it out or I'm noticing it in other people is because I'm denying it in myself. So I might have a strong reaction to those people. So if we had to love thy enemy and then look within and recognize that that enemy is within us, well, it's ourselves. It's us. But what are you going to do? Hurt yourself? We must have compassion. We must have compassion when we start to explore the shadow because it's painful. It's potentially stuff that's been suppressed since early childhood, or it's even deeper than that. It's cultural. And that takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of capacity to feel without being sucked into that judgment again, which is what pushed it away in the first place.
So Warren, let's use a very real life example to share a quick, without going into too much detail, to share just a snippet of something that happened to me yesterday. So someone basically, shouting at me and blaming me for things that I had nothing to do with. Any case, so that's now in short. So now all of these elements actually plays a role because, now you have to calm the mind firstly, because without you wanting, you want to figure it out. It still goes around and around in your mind. And now the compassion comes in for self, but also the other person. It's easier said than done, eh?
Very, very difficult to do. So let's say, here's the example. The person is shouting at you, and what did you feel in that moment? Did you feel guilty? Did you feel
Shock.
angry? Did you want to
Angry.
attack back? Did you feel put down? What was the main feeling? And you don't have to be too personal. Just give me a sense of it, and I can then work with that as the example.
Let's say anger.
Right. So someone shouting at you, and all of a sudden you get your back up and like, who do they think they are? Shouting at you. Who does this person think they are? And so I will give them a piece of my mind. Why did we react that way? Is because probably there's some unconscious aspect of ourselves that maybe we feel guilty for something else. But the way feelings are stored in our psyche is not specific to things that happened. Feelings are all stored in the same place. So all guilt, one place. All anger, another place. So every single memory that has a little bit of anger connected to it is stored in the same place. So that's why one little bit of anger can trigger 50 memories. And then, in comes all the stuff that has been held back, and now you want to attack the other person. You're attacking them really for bringing this up to your attention. Because really, if you realize that it had nothing to do with you, and you were liberated from that, from it having anything to do with you, you might look and think, wow, this person must be in pain. I wonder, what has gone on that they are attacking me? It's bizarre because it's got nothing to do with me. So that is their projection. And in psychology, you call that transference. And then what you had is called countertransference. And so you get into the cycle. So as a therapist or a psychologist or anyone, actually, you can work with this concept, transference and countertransference, and recognize what's coming is probably about them, but what came up for you is about you. So can you hold that inner part with compassion? Because the moment you have compassion for that part of you, how would you feel towards them?
I've got a question here, Warren. Are there times where those emotions are warranted on our part? So I understand the concept of someone triggering something in you. But let's just say, for instance, lawlessness on the roads. And I'm a big stickler for that. I cannot stand this lawlessness that we're facing, particularly here on the roads in South Africa. It just seems like every second person doesn't give a damn about the rules of the road, inconsiderate. That behavior really, aside from making me quite sad about our future, it makes me cross. I become angry. I want to, at times, get out the car and punch people.
Right. Makes sense.
And
right?
Is that because of something in me? I've often put it down to having a strong sense of justice, but perhaps it's more than that.
So, it gets quite complex, but let me share this from an organism point of view. Then you can see how deep this really runs. So when someone drives in a challenging way for you, or they cut you off, or they drive recklessly, what's actually happening?
You're asking me the question. For me, they're breaking the law. And the reason South Africa is heading down the road it is because the slightest, smallest laws are being broken without consequence. So it annoys me because I see in my everyday life the very reasons that South Africa is dropping off a cliff.
Right. So there's two things, right? There's this lawlessness where you see it as that broken window policy, where I think you understand what I mean, where you're looking at the smallest things, you're saying, if we aren't fixing these small things, then this is us heading off the cliff. There's a personality type in the Enneagram called the type 1. The type 1 looks at right and wrong. There's a right way and a wrong way. And they're a stickler for right and wrong. And it doesn't mean that that's incorrect. It just means that's where your attention goes to. If we look at why your attention goes there, why does your attention go to what's right and wrong? As opposed to, for example, if you looked at a type 6 in the Enneagram, a type 6 would go, this person is driving recklessly. It's just dangerous. He could have killed me. That's where their focus goes, right? So if we look deeply, why would you feel angry is because you're being threatened. Anger is an emotional response, a natural response to feeling threatened, which is about fear. And fear fundamentally is about my existence. And if we have to now pause that, because there are practical elements to what you're saying, which can't be discounted, but from a psychological point of view and a mental and emotional sense of well-being, we can go even deeper. We can take it to almost a spiritual dimension, which is, we don't know whether we're going to live or die tomorrow. At any moment in time, a meteor can just come out of the sky and take us out. And so we actually pretend that we're not going to die. And that's how we maintain a sense of certainty in the reality of uncertainty. And that is just what's the word? A convenience. But if you brought it back to that very moment of recognizing that in this moment, which is the true moment, the only thing that is existing, we're not sure if we're going to be in the next moment or not. And that's terrifying. But our consciousness doesn't stay there because it's too terrifying. So we go to this idea of a future, tomorrow, and then we go, oh, this country is heading off a cliff. But if you weren't here, what would that matter? Not to you, wouldn't matter to you. And so we look at this future and time as linear, and that way we can create some certainty. But in order to manage certainty, you need to force certain things outside of consciousness, because then you almost reducing reality into a square and going, okay, these things must happen so that things are safe. People should be safe. And I agree with that part, because who wants to walk around feeling your life is under threat at every corner? Like it's unnecessary in a way if people just stuck to the law. You know, we don't know if our neighbor's going to come over and kill me. I don't know. I just trust that they're not going to do that. I hope they're not going to do that. Now, everyone has that choice. And that choice we can put into every single aspect in life. But sometimes you have people who don't have as much awareness as you. And so they are playing out their drama onto the world. I'm so angry. Like, you've been angry enough where you just want to lose your temper and blow your top. You said you wanted to get out of the car and punch someone. If you did that, you'd be playing out that rage. And maybe in a moment of calm, you'd go, wow, that wasn't really necessary. I didn't really need to do that. And if you look at everyone's story, everyone has a legitimate reason for their rage. And if you look deep enough, it comes all the way back to this infant experience of being or experiencing chaos and then being forced into conformity, which is their personality. So I'm not discounting the fact that if someone breaks the law, there shouldn't be consequences because we're managing a society. But at the same time, you can go very deep in not being sucked into the story.
Mm.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, it happens so easily.
Yeah.
It happens so easy because it's so unconscious. And if you think about the instinct, the survival instinct in which we have to go into to even recognize that it's happening. So these inner processes that are happening of where emotions come from, if we're not aware of that, the instinct will trigger. You'll be out of your car, fist clenched, running towards the next person before you even realize it's happening.
Yeah.
That's true.
So really it comes down to survival. That's the fundamental.
The misunderstanding, because what has to survive? The body, but it's your body. Now this is a more of a spiritual perspective. It's your body. So the ego is the misidentification that you are the body only. And so then it's a matter of survival.
So Warren, if you say cultivating compassion, you are referring to cultivating something as developing compassion. So if we can get to the how, then I'm sure that is most people's question once again. How does one cultivate that? Because it doesn't come naturally.
It doesn't come naturally, you're right. And it doesn't come naturally because our philosophy of life doesn't include it. But if you were taught it as an infant, as this is how you lived, it might be much easier because you would recognize it as a tool and an avenue for living a harmonious life. But it's not in our philosophy. And so it feels like we are swimming upstream when we do it. So imagine that your nervous system is like an electric circuit. If I put a few volts through it, it can handle it. If I put too much, it burns out. But what happens if by just increasing the amperage or the voltage, I'm not an electrician, so maybe it's one or the other or both. So let's say we increase that, but just enough so that your body, your organism can then strengthen those new wires. And it can strengthen it and strengthen it over time where your capacity increases. So the first part is to just learn how to feel. But at the same time, you must also recognize that the judgment that you have on what you're feeling is causing the resistance. If you didn't judge what you were feeling, which is very challenging because that goes very deep, you would be able to recognize that you weren't in a threat. It's not actually a crisis. It's just an emotion. It's just a feeling. The teacher who taught me the Enneagram used to say, emotions are not emergencies. And you just be with your feeling and you just be with your emotion. But you have to practice this. It's because it's not natural. We're not taught it. We have to first learn how to sit with this feeling. And what you will find, once you get over that hurdle of judgment, feeling your emotion is actually quite cathartic. It's quite liberating. You recognize that you don't have to control it. Because there's a difference between feeling angry and beating someone up. They are not the same thing. People conflate them as the same. Anger is bad. It's not bad. It's an emotion. It's fundamental to your organism. It's bad according to a moral code of conduct if you allow that anger to be expressed through the action of violence. But what happens if you took that anger and you went for a run? Or you did push-ups, or you did exercise, or you went onto your canvas and you just painted that passionate expression of anger, but on a canvas. And then you sold that canvas and you became a multimillionaire. You see, the choice of how to express what we're feeling is the challenge. And the skill, though, because by sublimating it, you can actually learn that there can be a positive expression of something that feels uncomfortable, but it's not bad. And then beyond that is to be able to just be with it and to recognize it as an aspect, a color in your palette of human experience.
Warren,
Yes, Mary.
do children not have that compassion? On children
No.
compassion? Not.
No. They have a quality that is unconscious, but they also have murderous rage, which they would kill their sibling if you weren't there to parent them. So the child is what Ken Wilber describes as pre-enlightened or pre-transcendent, where all the qualities are there. They're all there, but they are undirected, and the awareness of the child is not focused at all. There's no awareness of who they are yet. There's no awareness of other people yet. And so this energy just explodes, and it can explode with first wanting to punch your sister in the face and then wanting to kiss her and not knowing that they're different. The one is just expression. The other one is just another expression.
That makes sense. I think one of the skills, if you say to just be with your emotions, I think one thing is to disconnect the feeling from the thoughts, because the thoughts fuels this feeling. If you buy into those, the mind that's trying to make sense of everything, or make sense of the emotion. So I think the skill I would say is to almost disconnect and just feel the sensation as a sensation versus trying to think it away.
Right, you can't think it away. And that's where kind of with Paul, where we got to in this complexity of, how do we manage ourselves on the road and other people, and the reality is here, the ego is the mind. There's no difference between who you think you are and your mind. And when you look carefully, when you investigate, where is this thing called the mind? Show it to me. You won't find it. But there's something there. And what happens is awareness gets diluted by the mode of perception that happens when looking through this organism. So it gets attached and identified with the sense of self that comes with perception of the five senses. And then you think there's a person here that's going to be slighted or that can be hurt. But if you look for that person, if you went, well, what is this person? Oh, it's me. Everyone says, me? Me. So look for that me. If you take your attention that is able to focus and look into things, take it and look into the actual origin of the me and see if you can find it. And then when you realize that you can't find it, all the judgment will be gone, because you'll realize that it's a misunderstanding. So if you think you are limited, then of course you would protect that with the energy of your soul. The energy of the soul is coming through you, is at your disposal. But if you think you're limited, then you'd use all that energy to protect yourself. But if you realize your limitlessness, that dimension, what's the threat? Of the body? Body's going to die anyway.
Yes. I enjoy the way that you explain it. It's quite deep for a Wednesday morning, but I'm really enjoying this.
I was going to say, we've really gone deep today. I'm feeling like this is a serious session.
Yes, but it's good. It's necessary just to put yourself a bit out of your mind perception and just look from a different perspective. I don't know how to explain it, but from the outside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Just recognize the perspective or the perception that we have is not real. It's a perspective that, if it's able to shift, even for a moment, you must understand the flaw in the perspective that we have then every day. Does it make sense? You know, if we are looking at something and today I see it and then tomorrow I see the same thing and I think, oh my gosh, how wrong was I? I must recognize the flaw in this thing called perception, and I need to err on the side of caution when making those judgments, because that mind cannot see the truth.
And that applies to everything. If you think of everyday life, it literally applies to our entire existence, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Because as you become enlightened, if we want to use that word, educated, aware, your perspective does change on everything all the time.
Right. And if therefore, if that is transient,
yeah,
how can it be the truth?
Yeah. In fact, I think in fairness, people who are experiencing the world in the same way that they were this time last year or 5 years ago, that must be a pretty bleak existence.
And frustrating. Yeah.
Sure.
And then you can have compassion for them because you can recognize in yourself how painful that must be.
I feel like this shouldn't be the last session with you, Warren. I feel like we should still have another 65 or 70 odd sessions.
Only with pleasure.
No, today's been very insightful. Thank you.
Yes,
welcome.
Absolutely. So Warren, this being our last session with you on stress, let's say mastery, what can people expect if they enroll in your course, which the link will be in the description, if anyone is interested to really go deeper and look into that mirror. So what can people expect?
So the training, I developed this training in different ways over the years. The training that is on the course is not labeled stress mastery, although it is the foundation of stress mastery course. It is about exploring and understanding yourself and starting with just your 5 senses. Like, just understand that there are processes that are happening, and how do we become aware of those processes that is creating my experience of myself. So there's teachings, there's exercises, and there's guided meditations in there that will take you through a whole gamut of practices, which maybe you resonate with one, and then focus on that one. And here's something that I learned from a Buddhist monk that I trained under when I was in London. He said, don't tell me about your experience in meditation unless you've been meditating for 3 years every day without missing a single day, 1 hour a day. And I realized the type, in that moment, it was just, I realized the type of commitment that is required to invest in yourself in order to make any fundamental change. So don't tell me after 3 weeks, I've tried meditation, it's not for me. Please. This is something that, if you think about the pattern of experience that you've had up until this point in your life, that pattern has created your pattern of who you think you are. If you want 3 weeks to change that, you're dreaming. Some people read a book, a moment of enlightenment, and then back to their old pattern. Why? Because the pattern is unconscious, and the unconscious is very challenging to become aware of without being seduced by it again. That's the effort that's required.
Sure. Thank you, Warren.
You're welcome.
I think that people will get a lot of value from that course. I mean, if we got so much value from just really thinking differently and changing our perspective through 3 short sessions with you, I can just imagine if you put that effort in on a daily basis, how you can transform. So thank you for sharing that with us.
You're so welcome.
Life-changing.
Thank you, Paul.
Warren,
thanks, Warren.
I don't know if I asked you this before, but you talk about the 5 senses, but not a 6th sense. You don't say
most people are not aware. Yes, because people want people very much about what was that advert? Seeing is believing, right? So that's where most people live. To become aware of the 6th sense, you must first recognize that there is an awareness behind the 5 senses of taking this information in. What is aware of that? Obviously, I can't go prove this to you. You have to prove it for yourself. You have to look for yourself. That's the secret of this gift.
Yeah.
You can tell people until you're blue in the face that there's a sixth sense, but until they look, they can only see, here's a pen. I have 5 senses. I can see them. What is the sixth sense? What are you talking about? But when you are sitting in that place, you see how comical their conversation is. They are trapped in this delusion that I am the body and there is nothing else. So you can lead a horse to water. But in the meditation course, you'll see it goes into, I don't call it the sixth sense, I call it the soul. It goes into these deeper layers of awareness, where awareness is not identity. Awareness is not a singular, separate sense of self. Awareness is this thing you're calling the sixth sense.
It's such a shame that this sort of education and enlightenment is not happening as part of being a school child. Like, imagine if we raised our children, I guess to some extent in our homes we can, but imagine if the education environment was more along these lines of what you've been talking about today, Warren. Just imagine what a different planet we'd be on.
Totally. I completely agree with you. Yet
those who think as you do, and to an extent how I do, and Mary and Mareka, we're often considered to be loonies by some.
Right, of course, because if body is who I am, then what we're talking about is crazy. What are you talking about? I can't see it. Show it to me.
Yeah. Sure. And on that note, thank you. Dankie. That was a wonderful way to end this series with Warren Munitz.
Fantastic.
And Mareka, you'll be sharing this, obviously, and we will upload to all of our platforms. You can check out Coaches Network SA for more details on this, hey?
Yes.
Wonderful. With a guest appearance from Hazel the cat. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Mary. Thanks, Mareka. And thanks again, Warren.